pointed out, you don't have community, then they're like, what do we do to make community? Let's start it right now, right? They kind of like get going that quickly as well in terms of being able to take feedback and fix it. Because I think it's the first university in the world which was specifically designed so as to make sure that students cannot gather to protest. That is NUS. Which is very fascinating, right? That the design can do that, right, for you. So it still exists the same way. And then, it was great. It's a bubble. It was beautiful for the 3 years that I lived there. And I knew my calling. And there was, and I came across so many incredibly talented designers and architects through that journey. And for me, my true calling was working in community. So Mumbai came to Natwar Parek colony. And my immediate response again was architects, right? We always think that something hasn't been solved because we haven't arrived there yet. That's what architects do, because it's like, oh, it's not been solved because I haven't tried solving for it. It was again, the instinct was, I still remember my first sketch. I'm like, I looked at that street with all the garbage, and then I made a sketch where, oh, what would happen if you added benches, etc. Like, it's really hard to suppress that sort of conditioning that one goes through, right? But that very quickly again changed to, how do people make community here? And it's, the complexities around the space, and setting up the practice, and having been in a nonprofit practice, being in a for-profit practice, the one thing I, just decided and made up my mind was, from a business model perspective, architectural practices just don't work unless you have really large scale projects, and then you become this whale where you're kind of taking on projects all over the world, right? Because the kind of training I got at Architecture for Humanity was that, how do you make sure that local architects and local designers are always involved and engaged in whatever you do? So in Singapore, I had that flavor because we were an international firm. We would sort of do the concept package and the design development, and then the local practitioner would have to take it and interpret it. That came with its own challenges, because in implementing in China, like, we would have issued a package, and then we would go back during construction. It's a completely different design. They pay the bills, but it's like not what you had designed or planned, right? So it's kind of, the problems are sort of in the sense that helicoptering in and trying to solve for some other context and culture which you have absolutely no idea about. Which is why, like, all of these projects that we just showed you, it's sort of really long-term engagement. Natwar Parek Colony, 6.5 years now since we've gone in, right? Sanjay Nagar, it's been 5 years now. With Nirame, we spent 3 to 4 years. Unfortunately, during COVID, a lot of the sex workers who are migrant sex workers had to go back to their respective villages. And it's been a little bit of a tricky situation for them in terms of coming back. And then a new set of women have come in. The old set of migrants have not come back. So that's something which, we kind of let our partners take on. The other thing that is really, really important, the complexity that all of us are discussing here, is that we make sure that we find very strong social partners. We don't go in to say that, hey, you know what, we can fix this for you. Natwar Parek Colony, sort of through Mahila Milan, Parveen ji, who is part of our core team now, she trained with Mahila Milan. That's how we got in there. The slum redevelopment project and the project with sex workers was through Snehalaya. They have the experience of working with the women and the children. And you kind of go in with them to really make sure that, A, you're not reinventing the wheel, which sort of ends up wasting a lot of resources. And I think the other one is designed for sex workers. We're doing slum redevelopment, and we're doing this work as well. But that's where, I'm also very interested in figuring out the financial mechanism and the financial model, because there's so much talent amongst us. But I think where we really, really struggle is trying to make that the economics of it work. So within my practice, Bhawna is an architect, but she said, she's a non-practicing architect. But she's a writer, and she's a community engagement lead. We have an artist on board, and we have someone with an economics background who works with us, and we have architects, we have an engineer on board. So the whole idea is to see how we can sort of be that bridge, and then bring in practices who are doing this kind of work. But our goal and our role is sort of to figure out the economics behind it. So Natwar Parek Colony is a massive neighborhood, right? 61 buildings and 25,000 at capacity. And that is actually, according to our city bylaws, 25,000 is basically a tier 3 city. And a tier 3 city has a sanitation department, a health department, education department, all of that. So now what happens when you look at one neighborhood with these many people who live together, but you don't have any of those departments functioning within it? So again, as I mean, arts festival, everybody is invited to this, and we have how many artists who came from outside for this? 12 artists who are collaborating with us, and architects too. We have Areen Studio is Put Your Hands Together, are working with us to, work on the stage, etc. So it's creating that truly collaborative mechanism, but trying to understand, how to make sense of this from an economics perspective, how to make sense of it from a political perspective as well. Because, now that placemaking and idea of identity and belonging is really, really taking root, there are moments when people are like, well, you're not from here. Like, so which is where we make it very, very clear that we're facilitators. Leaders are the people who live in those neighborhoods, right? Leaders are the people who are from there. So as such, in all of our projects, the people who really, in a way, lead us are the community members and all the social organizations. So I think I'll stop now, and then I'm happy to answer any more questions that we have.
We'll now move on to Vaibhavi from CityLabs. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Anuj. Thank you, Rupali, for inviting us. Unfortunately, Pratyush and other partners haven't been able to come. So I'm the only one representing, happily. um, for CityLabs, my idea of CityLabs would be very different from what maybe Pratyush would describe it. But so it's, for me, I think CityLabs, we started as a research and training organization. Pratyush initiated it. And so I graduated, and I did my thesis under him, and he asked me if I was interested in doing a competition with him. So I said, yes, of course, I would love to do a competition. And we ended up doing it, and we won the competition. And then I sort of stayed back in the practice, because again, like had been working with him during my thesis for a long time. And it was a really nice bond that we had made. And I think he has a very informal sort of a way of working. So that's how sort of Pratyush and I, and at the same time, he had this training, uh, he had like workshop. He used to take workshops out of SEPT as winter schools or summer schools, and he wanted to sort of start stepping away from it, because he felt that traditional academic institutions sort of narrow your engagement with how you deal with sites, how you deal with research projects. And he wanted to start something which is not linked to traditional academic institutes. So that's how I think CityLabs started. And since he was also himself carrying out research on Indian cities across the Indian subcontinent, he felt this need for something like that. And when I joined his practice, these are some sketches and research work that he has done in his books. And there's another book that we are publishing together. It's written by him, but we've all helped him. So the visuals and all of this is something that, so actually we all got together because of the love of drawing that we have, and how the act of making drawings sort of brought all of us together. And now that so we are 4 partners now. We just became a small initiative a couple months ago only. And it's me, and it's Pratyush, and we have a conservationist called Snigdha Srivastava, who's been working with Pratyush since the past 6 years now. And we have another person called Dhruv, who is doing urban research in LSE right now in London. So all of us are doing our own thing. I'm working at Case Design in Mumbai, and all of us sort of went on to do our own thing. But what brings us together is the act of making drawings, the act of looking at Indian cities and how can we make it easier for everybody to understand and uh, grow from. So these are some sketches and drawings from that. And we all felt the urge that the urban questions, like cities, Indian cities are really, really complex topics. And we didn't know, like when I graduated, I didn't know how to navigate through them, how to start begin to understand them. And that is I think that was true for a lot of people in my batch or in my circle. So like as I said, that we heavily dependent on the act of making drawing and writing and critical thinking. So these are some very simplified abstract drawings from the book that we helped Pratyush in, which is going to, I think, release in April now. But we really tried to make sense of any cities in a way that is very easy for people to understand and navigate. Because we felt that Indian cities had so many stories to tell, but very few information regarding it. And the information was always, we felt, very patchy. Like there was not one point where we could go to and look at how the city has evolved or what made the city what it is right now. So these are some speculative drawings that Snigdha did on titled Tent City, where how Mughals sort of moved from one place to another, and on the way they would make a temporary city with tents, and the emperor would be living in the center, and it would become like a small city in itself only. And slowly we started creating an identity. We made a logo for the initiative. We sort of started floating workshops where like-minded individuals like us would like to. It was also um something we wanted to earn money from so that we could fund our research. So this sort of helped us fund the researches or the field training, on field research that we would be carrying out. So we and with each city we started discovering new things that we would not have discovered otherwise. And we started taking workshops from 2018 to till today, and we've documented about 8 to 9 cities till now. Kathmandu, Panjim, Mysore, like. And at the same time we started taking writing workshops where because it was the pandemic time and we still wanted to do something, that's when we thought of going online, and writing being a major part that Pratyush used to focus on, and I've got to learn so much in it. So that's how we started going online and reaching out to people who were interested in the same things that we were, and trying to understand that Seema Khanwalkar. So we took a workshop along with her and all our participants. And it's always like a joy to when different people from different backgrounds come together and learn something. And in this still everyone showing their pets in their houses because we are all locked in. So that's how we found, and obviously trying to create a community of scholars and researchers who have the same, who have very different perspective, but the same idea of learning more about cities in India. And that's how we sort of carried out on-site workshops as well, like in Udaipur or in Chamba for that matter, that is in Goa. And everywhere we would take up small alleys, streets to gather around, go and look at the city, and everybody comes back. Even we would go sketching, all of us would come back, get our diaries, and like how we used to do in RSP, but like a mini RSP. but it is just so much fun to get together and learn something when you have a framework for it. So, and we also wanted to create a database that is available for free for you to access whenever you want to tap into some history of a city, and you can easily access. And we would do these dialogue series from which we would get to know so much more of what's happening around the world. And we would make sure after each workshop we would create these booklets which would compile everything that we have done in the workshop. So it becomes like a database for anyone looking at the city of Baroda, Kathmandu, Goa, so on and so forth. And we also sort of published a compilation of all the works that we've been doing till now, and selected certain essays, researches, writings from all over all our workshops, and published it on Amazon recently. The act of drawing really, as I said, made us all get together, and that's also why we want to share as much as possible. So we would do these kind of exhibitions in the studio itself, so that we can reach as many people as possible and get to know and learn from everybody. These are some process drawings. And we also felt like we needed to start a discourse that would not only talk about the design problems, but also like just one visual, creating that visual identity that, so we floated this competition called Rip, Mix and Burn. And I think we were really happy with the kind of works that we got out of it. And so this was one of the entries that we got, where we had asked to make a representation of the future of your city which you think is ideal. And I know it was all abstract, but it really gave us such nice perspectives on how our cities are envisioned and how we would want to carry them forward. So these are some participant entries which we really cherished and learned from. And just to take that baton further, we are researching on this place called Sabli, and it's there's a dam that's built next to the village now, and we observed that how it gets flooded every monsoon, and the water sort of recedes every monsoon. So this is how the first time we went to Sabli, this is how we found it. And then as and when we would go to the site, it would just keep flooding and flooding. And then that's how the water would take over most of the part of the land. And then we would go, so there are these beautiful old heritage structures there, mostly Jain temples, and because it used to be, I think, a part of an important trade route. So there are a lot of Jain temples and step wells. So we would go and document all of these. So like this is a step well that we found, which is a very beautiful step well, and it has like a pavilion on one side and the steps on the other. And this is how we found it in summer, and on the image on the right, and the left is how we sort of saw it when the water was all over it. So that is something that we are researching, and we want to float a competition soon regarding the same. So I think that's how we are placed. But the end goal is to sort of make a community of like-minded individuals and sort of grow on working and collaborating with people, really. And that's how I think we would also do like Saturday pizza parties and all of that, just as a way to meet people. And that's us. Like we are growing, but this is one of the photos that we had taken studio. Yeah. But I'm really glad that we are able to share this today, because this is the first time I think at CityLabs we've ever come out, because before this we were all in our own bubble and we would not like get out. But thank you for calling us.
Thank you. That was a very, very informative and interesting round of long introductions. And, uh, there are some things that I've crystallized from all your presentations, which kind of, in some sense, you know, uh, repeat, but also open up new things which we can discuss. One is this. I mean, I have listed three for now. The question of agency, which you all feel the lack of agency in your existing kind of primary education that you underwent. The lack of agency in architecture, the lack of agency in your artwork. Um, the second is the question of funding, where all of you are kind of trying to figure out new ways in which you are trying to put together resources to be able to make things possible. And then the third is, and so is also the question of I mean, I find it very interesting that so many of you are in some sense very discreet also. Like we had to really, when we were planning to kind of gather groups for this discussion, we were really like struggling that where do we find this kind of resource where someone may have kind of made a list of it. And so this whole discreteness and identity of it also, and I think there's a charm in that also, uh, which is also in some sense connected to the idea of the notion of friendships and communities, where all of you are in some sense oriented to cater to a community, but also in order to do that, you first need to formulate or form a community within yourselves as groups. And also in that sense, which community do we reach out to, or what is the imagination of the community that one hopes to work with, engage with. Uh, so I would actually like to kind of, in these kind of coordinates, ask you all to respond to how do you, and yeah, one more thing was the idea of the double job, that you are doing something, but there's also one more thing that has to happen. And how do you manage, and so how do you kind of switch between your patron mode and the social mode in some sense, to put it loosely. So yeah, just to kind of use these as coordinates and respond to how you really manage the mode of operation of your groups through all these factors of agency, funding, and managing labor, time, resources, and so on.
Uh, just yeah, like I feel the point that you made about lack of agency. I think personally, I've never felt a lack of agency in any space, whether it's architectural education or whether it's going somewhere. It could be a privileged thing because yes, we are urban English speaking educated with I was brought up in a certain way to raise my voice, but I also I'm raising that point because yes, architectural education will only do so much. And you do when you enter an architectural college or later as an architect you enter society, there are other parts of your identity as well. You don't stop being other things. So yes, architecture college or the education is teaching you certain things, but the world around you is also teaching you. So why is this, this? Yes, I mean, and at see what you guys are doing. I really appreciate that you're trying to sort of expand the concept of architectural education. But I feel this constantly, oh, हमको ऐसे पढ़ाया, हमको ऐसे नहीं पढ़ाया. you know go beyond that. You are a citizen, you are a social being, you're constantly learning from communities at your home, people you're interacting with. But I feel like it's somewhere to do with the narcissism that's attached to being an architect, that part of your identity becomes so powerful that you're just constantly like, oh, I'm just an architect. No, you're not an architect. The education is only a tiny part of the education that you got. You're constantly absorbing so much, so many things. And somewhere I feel like we stop operating, we're constantly thinking like that. So yeah, that was, I feel like my, and I think we all have agency. The, you know, in this room, I feel a lot of us have a lot more agency than, you know, the communities we work with. And so to say that, uh, yes, I feel on a lot of levels, I also empathize with practices who are trying to like figure out, but I think we do have agency.
Just to kind of contextualize how I was thinking of agency is, what I meant actually was how, number one, lack of agency in the sense of what we have been taught, and therefore the springing point of what we will be doing on field, which gets completely dismantled when you come together as a group, which is where the second idea of agency, that I alone cannot do it, let me collaborate with someone else to be able to do this. And so this kind of formulating a new agency and new voice for your practice is what I meant by the lack of agency in the existing role.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I really need a mic. No, just to add to that. So basically, what is it that you are able to do as a collective through these solidarities, which you think you would not have been able to do it through an individual practice? You know, so maybe that may be a useful thing to reflect on. And then, of course, the second question, which is what Anuj was talking about, the funding. You know, like all of those. How do you? It's all free. How like what I mean, I know it's different for different people. Some of you were talking about this whole collaborative model where you break down the rent to like whatever, you know, almost like that 1 rupee sachet, the shampoo packet. Or Vaibhavi is talking about working with these other jobs and then coming together. So I don't know, maybe it may be interesting to talk about the modalities and then the possibilities that this kind of collaboration allows.
I'll just so just to, you know, I think funding, Sandhya will talk. uh, but just, you know, like the question that you asked, what you're able to do as a collective, I feel working with, you know, whether it's the Sanjay Nagar slum community or the Natrapari community, one has been an extremely humbling experience in that way, to understand that, you know, as individuals you really cannot do anything. And it has also made me as a practitioner realize of collaborations beyond a certain class, beyond certain caste communities. I feel like at certain level, when, you know, I used to think about, oh, where is my community, or constantly thinking of, oh, you know, we have to, like you said, like creating a community of like-minded people. And yes, you know, because that is our comfort zone, we also want to feel safe and secure. But the kind of work that we do, we really need to break out of that. We really, you know, we're really pushed to sort of work with all kinds of people. So right now, to how do you collaborate with BMC, how do you collaborate with MMRD, how do you know, talk to people who, yes, they're speaking the same language, but we don't understand the same thing. So, you know, I can say something, we're saying the same thing, but the understanding is just so different because of the experiences, you know, certain people have gone through. And but as when you come together as a collective, and I'm not talking just about CDA as, you know, 6 7 people we are, we look at the community design agency as also the communities we work with. And for example, just to give you the Govandi Arts Festival, we've just been working, we are on 4 hours of sleep, so we'll talk about that project a lot because it's happening in a week. Right now we have a team of 60 people. There are volunteers from Shivaji Nagar, from Beganwadi, from Lalubhai as well, PMG. And I feel like if we were to do it 5 years earlier, we wouldn't have been able to do, because we didn't have the tools. We didn't have the tools to have a team which is so multidisciplinary, which is so diverse, like different religion, different class, like it's really incredible. And I feel this process of being on ground, working together with them, has, you know, just somewhere broken that idea of who your community is. So, you know, you have to sort of look at communities as your community. And I'm not saying that, okay, there will be that gap, you know, there always be those gaps of privilege and class and caste and all those things. But how do we move beyond that is something that we've been able to learn through this collaborative approach of working.
Sandhya was going to talk about the funding.
Yeah, I mean, just. Yeah, I think I fully agree. I think the correct answer also is that, I mean, everyone joins hands, works with strengths, individual strengths, and then you get, kind of. But I mean, just this moonlighting thing, I'd like to comment on that because it doesn't mean you need to have a practice in the traditional sense and then moonlight to do this on the side. We, as soon as Bandra Collective was formed, the feeling did set in that why are we even doing that other kind of mode, because we learned that and we were in a hurry to start. You just start and you're it's not like we've created a very kind of strong pyramid in the studio. It's still a kind of congenial friendly atmosphere, no glass cabin and all that, but it's still me talking, not the rest. So I guess that mode will needs to kind of change, and it's not nice moonlighting for all the good things, and then you think your practice is market driven, which is I mean, makes you feel really sad. So I think if you're able to get more strength and more momentum in a collaborative way, I think there's some middle ground which needs to be achieved. We are, strangely, all of us are working together now on commercial projects as well. So it has created a little camaraderie. We use each other's studios like it's ours. I mean, I know that Samir Studio is good at this, and Samir is well connected, and all that. So you can kind of navigate a much larger terrain, which was at some point not accessible. We are a small studio, and we do small work. So it's a playground. It feels like a playground. And if you use the strengths correctly, I think that you don't need to fall back on some market kind of practice and then think of it as the things that's cross subsidizing the all your good work basically. So I think some middle ground needs to be found in that sense. Yeah, what nonsense! I'm representing 6 architects.
Okay, what's a non-diplomatic answer?
All your writing is so diplomatic. You can't call anybody out on that. Sorry.
But everybody here will vouch for it that I can really, well, like,
Don't have to respond to her.
now I
Don't
should be
don't let her bait you.
diplomatic.
I mean, to your point about this idea of having a daytime job and then moonlighting, right? I've I've kind of really I've given it a lot of thought in my own small way, in my limited understanding of how businesses work. I mean, looking at larger practices and like how do they establish themselves and they're able to like become these big practices in a way that and then and then the scale gets to a place where work does get repetitive, right? And that's how you're able to make profits. And I think at this table we're all talking about really doing community based contextual work, and that's where it's going to be such a huge challenge, right? One, because that's how businesses are set up, and two, as much as I love modern architecture, I was also a huge fan of, at one point, Peter Eisenman's drawings and his buildings, etc. I find that our generation sort of going forward, all of us, I mean, including all of you, like we're kind of part of the same generation. There's going to be a lot of things that we will need to undo because of this hero worship of flying in architects, and then they'll tell you exactly how you should live or how you should play, and because of the way those were set up, and you're trying to reverse it, right? For example, even in private sector practice, let's say it's a very large hotel you're building. The hotel could respond very differently to the outside world, but then there's so much, there's not enough understanding of what is its function in a city. And I've seen that happening in very small ways. For example, I go back to Singapore again because they really decided to fix their community public part. You know, they woke up like 10 years ago and said, we need to do this. They built this hotel wherein the hotel said, we will take over the sidewalk. And they had used the same landscape design and architecture as they had it in the hotel, right? So it's really beautiful the moment you walk under it. It's not sort of inward facing, but it's more outward facing. So what are the points of, you know, social engagement and leverage that you can bring? And that's something which I kept looking for in all of the projects, right? I mean, in terms of how do you then push the clients to think, hey, think a little differently in terms of even what will it be like on the outside. Like now on I live in Bandra, and you know, walking by Bandra, and I'm always reimagining a lot of those, you know, high walls and even the newer buildings that are coming in. Like, how can it really play a role? Yes, of course, we're not going to dismantle capitalism, and I think that's, we can write about it. Bhawna is going to write about it, and you guys are going to write about it. We're not going to dismantle it in our lifetime, right? But how can we bring in those small shifts and changes so that you can find meaning in your work? And it's not going to be easy negotiating with the client, right? The client is like the bottom line. They're like constantly looking at the bottom line, and you kind of have to like respond to that. But within that, how can you make those adjustments? So in a way, I think it's going to be, I think it would also be wrong to say that people who are engaging in the moonlighting work that you're talking about, it's so important to do that because that in turn informs your practice. Because if you decide to choose one over the other, the danger is that again we're creating silos. And then that's how I feel about it. I mean, of course, we don't do high-end projects. We do, you know, the kinds of works that we have shown here, and I am constantly trying to figure out, you know, the economics behind it and how do we use design and then to leverage what can be built, and using different forms of funding to do that. But I think it's so even when, you know, when I talk to other colleagues of mine who are doing, you know, beautiful work, like I love beautiful design and I love, you know, really polished work, if you will, and it's something to admire. But I think it's so important to have your feet in both places and not choose one over the other, because it really, really informs how you're building for the private sector as well. So in our projects, again, you know, we're not there yet. We're not financially sustainable yet. Again, it's a process that we're trying to figure out how to, you know, for example, the Sanjay Nagar project, what we did was we said, you know, we would sort of pay for the DPR, right? The detail, it's called detailed project report. That's for all government, Sarkari projects. When you have to do a project, you have to give them something called the DPR. The DPR involved actually engaging with the community and building consensus first over there, right? And then we went back to the city and said, hey, these guys are ready. They didn't believe us because they said, we have been trying to build their homes for the last, we have made 3 attempts and they've driven us away. And are you sure that this is happening? So we used that, and then we actually got the project approved under the PMAY program, right? So finding different ways of being able to do that. And of course, in this project, we're not going to be able to recover the money that we have spent, but again, it's kind of establishing that process and sharing it, you know, far and wide so that other practices can get involved as well in similar work. And then how do you leverage your capacities that way to get more funding? And I think that's what, you know, you guys you did as well, right? Because you established that presence, and then somebody decided that, hey, well, this is necessary, and then let's put money into it. And the process, the unlearning piece is what I'm talking about, is to push the private sector markets to understand that they have a larger role to play. You know, everybody's heard about ESG. You know, is everybody familiar with ESG? No. So ESG is basically a new metric, and it's again debatable because they're saying that it's a lot of like, it's ESG washing, like greenwashing. So E stands for environment, sustainability, and governance. So all of your financial, what do you say, companies, banks, investors, etc., they're all being pushed to meet these metrics, right? So even a mining company will have to meet the ESG metrics. How they magically do it, that's debatable again, but you'd have to kind of meet that. And it's going to permeate everywhere. So environment, social, and governance. I think all of those things are going to impact how we practice design and architecture. And it's really about how to make sure that design and architecture fits within that larger the larger narrative in how cities are being built, in how economies are being built. This notion that somehow architecture and design is this, the way I describe it, even for today, is that the role that architects play, we are the cherry on top of the cake. Because the flavor of the cake, the size of the cake, what's going inside of it, all of that is decided by a group of accountants, lawyers, and real estate developers, the marketing guys, right? And then they finally call us to say, hey, we want you to design this building. So the constant question of like, how do you then make sure that the language that we're using, the vocabulary, like what Bhawna was saying, right? Even BMC we collaborate with, MMRDA we collaborate with, even within the community to talk about environment, there is no vocabulary to speak to the communities, right? Because it doesn't exist. So how do we make sure that we understand all of those complexities and all of those layers, so then you have a voice at the table. I had a design studio where I asked, I'm not going to name names, star architect, you know, and I asked him, how do you respond to the political scenario in China? Because you have so many buildings in China, like amazing, in terms of the shapes and the forms and all of that. And I said, because when they took us to China, I ended up finding out that the homes were being sold for $1 million, all cash. And the laborers there were on literally $2 a day per day. And I saw the sandwiches that they were eating. So I asked him, like, what role do architects have to play? Because he was, speaking, great things about China. I don't know how they do it. We just send drawings and magically they make it happen and it's so precise and it's amazing. And I said, but the workers. And he said, that has nothing to do with architecture. That's what we need to unlearn and undo, because it has a larger impact, because we have sort of made ourselves irrelevant to the larger questions of how cities are built and how societies are built. So it's going to be a process, but I really think that it is so important that a lot of practices do that, wherein they are sort of continuing to do the private sector work, but again, sort of being able to donate time pro bono. And I'm sure, and I already see the trend and that shift happening where I think that people are beginning to see the relevance of having design practices engage with city building, which has happened in Europe, in North America. It's happening even now, and it's that sort of movement has started in India. So I'm very, very hopeful that way.
I really want to appreciate you're pinpointing these three things. First of all, agency, funding, and doing that double job, because that's actually precisely how I would explain my experience in joining Jaadughar and starting this with Pratik and Sahej, and you know being able to continue my work. I'll give you a little background. I studied computer science, and I worked for many different places that were completely unsatisfying to me. And it wasn't until I joined these two that I was able to actually find something that I was, happy to do, and was confident enough to do also, and funding and double job are actually completely integral to that, because I suddenly didn't have to pay, the entirety of my rent. That was really helpful. And the double job gave me meaning in all aspects of my life, my programming job was great. And also, when I turned the computer off, I was taking care of a space, helping and contributing to a space that I really believed in, that I was able to, be proud of, in this nice way. I'm sorry, I'm taking the scale down a whole lot from this comment, but yeah, actually, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think this aspect is super important, where you just feel like rent expenses are taken care of. I think that really makes things easy. But I think once you've done that, okay, I think let me go back a few years. I went to grad school at MIT, and then that MIT and Harvard ecosystem it's so hard to step out of because there's so much going on all the time, and anything you're thinking of or anything that you're into, there's someone doing it at, like at the topmost level, and you have access to them, and there's so many things constantly. And then you have your master's degree, you graduate, and then it's like PhD kar lo, right? And then I don't know, something about that transition felt really like giving in to that. And I felt like I should probably take a break from that. And my sister used to live in New York, and मैंने वहाँ पे चूहे देखे थे. I was like, that's a real city. You know, people cross the street without looking. There's rats, there's trash everywhere. That's a real city. That's the kind of place I want. I want to move out of this sanitized kind of a bubble, even if it's amazing, and be in a real city for a while. And then when I went to New York and I was there for a couple of years, I got a studio there and I started working. And then it was like, Bombay mein to aur bhi kachra hai. So let's take it there, right? Like that's even more real to me and my experience of living, right? Especially like I have friends from that long ago who are still there, who I can still talk to and get along with. Right? Vipin's there as well. He's another friend from that time. Anyway, yeah. So my point here is that there is a level of engagement that is a mandate. When you're engaging with the real world through your job, through that, there is a mandate that you're being given. Whether it's to teach, whether it's a design consulting project, whether it's working with someone, that is really, really important to be in, because again, you can, sort of drown yourself in this myth of the, and I grew up on this myth of the hero inventor or hero artist, right? Like, I'm an engineer, I grew up on that. And it is so tempting to say that, ek saal kaam karunga, there'll be 20 lakhs in the bank, then I don't need to worry about anything for a while, whatever, I'm sorted out. It's such a fantasy. We've all had that, right? Constantly, but it's not real, because you do that. And I did that. January, I was sitting at home and I was depressed. I can't do anything, right? Because, okay, now I'm at the studio, I'm staring at the wall, I'm staring at the screen. And sure, like I do that long enough, something will come and that's fine. But the point is not that. That mandate is really, really important, to be out and to be seeing what's going on and engaging with that. Like being here, for example, or like teaching at any other place or taking up projects. I think that's one really important aspect. And the second really important part of that double job for me is the people that you bring into your practice from that. Like if you're working on things that you really care about, you're really interested in, you bring that into your practice. You bring them in, and that way things grow. You cross, like I know people through her practice, through his practice, and so on, right? Like that is so beautiful. Even those people now knowing each other, just coming to parties at Jaadughar, it doesn't matter. Just that opens up and becomes a whole monster in itself. And I think that's really important as well, that there should always be motion. There should constantly be motion through your space, through your practice. You can't let it stagnate. You can't live in that myth of sitting there and I'll just think of something and that'll be the next big thing and ho jayega, Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted you, your group to.
No, it is a silly question. Were you depressed with 20 lakhs or without 20 lakhs?
So Pratik talks about this mythical genius ना, वो है हाँ असली में, वो दो नहीं ऐसे रिला रहा है ऐसे इसने दो species एक सेकंड है दो नहीं ये मैं ऐसे like like I get to like say कि ये इतना cool है क्योंकि ये मेरा दोस्त है नहीं पर Pratik named 2 species of frogs, right? He mapped the flight path of the Amur falcon, which goes to Siberia, if I'm remembering this right. Anyway, I could go on. I love this guy. Anyway, no, but what's really beautiful is the way Jaadughar functions ना is ठीक है हम लोग agency की बात कर रहे हैं ना मैं थोड़ा एक conservative word use करता हूँ ज़्यादा आजकल लोग बोलते नहीं हैं power power like this is literally like what we're doing is like kind of in really magical mythical ways increasing power or how that happens is like you flow with power like you kind of like feed off, and like you sort of create these reciprocations of power where like our journalist friends are coming in, like people who are like trying to दबे इसमें बात करेंगे या जो भी, और फिर उधर like जब भी दोस्तों के साथ बैठे हो ना, खुद से आवाज उठ जाती है यार, एंड वो स्पेस को क्रिएट करना ना, सिर्फ दैट्स जस्ट द फर्स्ट स्टेप, ठीक है, वो करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं हम लोग. That's what led to people's freedom. That's what has kind of literally okay, now how do you do that, huh? The moment you do have power, any semblance of it, decentralize it, like in any way possible, like, and that dissipate, like wo kar rahe hain hum log, and wo ho raha hai through laughter, like literally, and yeah, I mean that's our way of dealing with it. हाँ, फंडिंग नहीं है, but वो भी आ जाती है, like I mean, like.
So because you are at it, can you quickly tell us how did you make People's Freedom show possible?
So I मतलब
Like how did 79, 80 artists come together and got a space, got the art, installed it, and how did it all work out?
Okay, I mean, in terms of the creative aspect, it was completely a collective curatorial process. Yogesh is here. Yogesh is heavily involved also, and it was like that. Even for our own works, we had a sort of meeting and discussed each individual artwork that had to be up and where it had to be and so on. Like that was a very collective process, and some of my own works didn't make it to the show. Right, so I mean that was really fun, and it was very heated as well because everyone had strong feelings about this and everyone was expressing them, and that was how it went, and it was great. From the logistical point of view, it's also interesting because the people who wanted to do the show didn't have any funding, they didn't have any money, but what they had was sort of funding in kind. So we got the space for free, we got discounts on the theater where the performance was going to be, and so on. But largely it happened on small donations. Like if you come to the studio, I'll show you, I still have like guddies of 10s, 20s and 50s that people came and put in the contribution box, that people, and the contribution boxes were passed around during the show, during performances and so on. And that was like a large chunk of the funding for the show. So I feel like the kind aspect was a lot of the larger sort of expenses that happened, we didn't have to pay them. So we were able to mount this show, a week-long show with so many artworks and so on for $1 lakh, which I thought was not possible, honestly, to start off. I didn't think it would be possible for that much, but that's not the true cost actually, right? It's the people who were involved were able to make it happen because of their connections, right? Pamphlets were printed by someone who was one of the activists who had a printing press. Like everything, kahin na kahin se kuch karke, it sort of happened.
I mean, that's amazing because I was just trying to think through that. What are the resources we exchange when the medium of money is taken away?
Yes.
And
yes.
And that's very interesting to then figure out that what can you really even ask for, and where do we search for these things to be asked for, which is also an inventory of its own.
But Anuj, there's more than that also, right? Because you can't at the same time, and we were falling victim to this because funding is always such a beast. It's a sword hanging above your head, right? That it's so easy to at some point start cutting corners and be like, okay, but the thing about this whole thing is funding is conceptual as well, right? Like if we're doing this, then we should be paying an artist fee, right? Even if we're doing it based on 20 rupees ke note mein jayega, but jayega, hoega, and we did. Because you can't not do that anymore. If you're doing it this way, then every principle that you're talking about, you need to set the stage for that, right? And let me tell you, from commercial side of things, we had many represented artists, right? We had artists. Amol showed in Documenta this year. Prabhakar was in Venice Biennale. We had these guys, and their work was shown next to fresh graduates from JJ. Doesn't matter, but nobody showed up from the art scene. No gallerists were there, right? And we took that as a sign of success. Like, okay, some buttons have been pressed somewhere, and that's good. Like this is also possible, right? That was really important.
Great. I'll have
Yeah.
Vaibhavi.
Like for me, I feel like collaboration for me really made things happen. Like if we were to not come together in this particular format, I don't think we would be able to produce what we produced. And I think it's true for most people sitting here. And that's what it sort of brought a momentum in all of us that would not have been possible if a single person would have taken the stand to do it. It would have happened, but it would be in a completely different time and space, and it would be the products of which would be very different. So I think that's the power of a collaborative of people coming together. um, and yeah, I feel in terms of funding, like moonlighting really like after working in the office and you come home and then you have something else going on, it really fed it really had I had a lot of questions, because on one hand, everybody knows that architects here, if we are employed, then we are underpaid. It's a known fact. But so this really gave me some kind of momentum to uh, pay for my rent, obviously, but also have something going on at the side which would keep me going when I have had a dull day. Because meeting the people I have chosen to collaborate with is a joy in itself. Like just seeing them, talking to them, and discussing what we feel for really motivated me through whatever was going on. And I think that's what collaboratives really do. And yeah.
I think just, I mean, it's quite interesting to listen to y'all. I mean, what Zameer began with this whole idea of uh, sharing resources. You know, like in the sense that you have different offices that have different strengths, different studios that have different strengths, and then you kind of look at what is it that one can offer, you know, versus the other, and bringing those resources together. And it's interesting to think of these solidarities, because those solidarities did not exist for the longest time. I mean, we were doing some work in China with some of these artists, and it was really interesting because each one almost had a hard drive that they would be walking around with and saying, oh, if you don't think my work fits into this show, then this is what my friends are doing, you know, and this is what somebody else is doing. And you're like, you know, we've not heard of this in the art world here. You know, it's like my work, and that's it. And so in that sense, this what I'm listening to in terms of, you know, we all talking about each other's work, or you're talking about like one studio being small and another one having the conference space and another one having something else. So in that sense, sharing resources and knowing each other's strengths, and then you're talking about this idea of an extended community, like an extended, like it's not, the practice is not the 6 or 7 multidisciplinary people, but it's like this whole maybe 80, 90 people. We saw the Govandi rappers yesterday, and in some ways that was also an extension of that practice. Or then Vaibhavi's group, which in some ways also probably is like probably begins with a hierarchy. There's a teacher and then there's a student, but then it starts diffusing, and there's almost this kind of club, or this kind of friendship that starts bringing you together and starts diffusing that. So I think that this forms of organization, forms of structures, and then also probably talking about very different kind of funding sources here. You're talking about putting the hat in there and, you know, collecting this money, or you guys also talking about maybe sharing things from projects that you know profit in some ways, and then putting it back into something else. um, I think these we require many more models of, because I don't think we can end with like one funding model. This one funding model has completely limited us in terms of what is possible even. And of course, you need to feed yourself, and so nobody's saying it's fresh, you know, love and fresh air, or even some of the exploitation that, you know, like you don't pay artists fees, and you know, then you have starving artists. And so one is not talking about that, but then what are other ways, of sustaining oneself, and then not relying on a particular model of practice, I think is super important. um, And I think just to, I mean, what is really, I think, at the end of it, holding everyone together is friendships. So it seems like friendships are the the model of the future. You know, what does it mean to kind of build these friendships, and how do institutions learn, larger institutions as well, because somewhere it's also smaller collectives here, right? Like smaller, say, groups of 4 or 5. But how does that extend to a larger institutional model that is able to work with friendships as a mode of working? Because otherwise the only way in this kind of hierarchical way, through which one is able to work, I think is also an important um, learning. So Anuj, if you want to say something, or we can also open it out to the
Yeah,
audience,
yeah. I
because
was
there's
just
a
going
lot
to
of
say that if anyone is already,
sorry, Zameer has something. Because we also have an interesting audience here, students from various years. There's also this whole, the larger collective that works with you all, and then also the panelists from this morning, because I think there's a lot of continuation of the discussion that happened in the morning that's happening here. So I'm sure there will be some things to add from there.
So, I mean, two quick points then. You talked about pooling resources. I think one more, while we started working on another commercial project together, it was a bunch of villas. Project came to us way beyond our scale. They wanted to repeat 5 villas. I said, why do that? Get 5 architects. Uh, so some of the Bandra Collective architects were working with us on that project. And it was lovely because, I mean, it's also a sharing of ideologies, because I might be, I might cut a small tree here and there. If it's not on the survey drawing and you just see it, hey, this is not on the survey, just cut it, that kind of thing. While some of them are extremely kind of hard on that point. And we had to actually negotiate plot boundaries, because so it was the most irregular plotting that we had ever seen. There was a contoured side, and it's forested, and the most complex kind of outline. And then when it actually started when we started designing together, some were some had gone down the deep end on the environment, so they were chosen certain materials, and all that. Of course, we are again not ideological on that front. Uh, we'd be so then it's almost like your, and then the whole project got fed by all the ideologies. So that was the, so it's also not only the resources, but I think everyone's moderated in the whole coming together kind of thing. And I think that that also as a visual makes us more accessible as a group, because individual ideologies, I mean, you're always going to pull your little niche, kind of bunch in. But for example, uh, height of lockdown, first one, uh, all our practices, everyone's like calling, hey, you got any projects and all, that. So basically everyone had gone flat out. And Bandra Collective was working hard. So, whoever could come with the mask, and then we all got COVID after that first meeting. But I mean, the idea was that it was active. We were doing the marking for the markets, and kind of it was so exciting. I mean, no work, absolutely, and this work suddenly takes off, and we were marking social distancing, the circles, and allocating spaces for vendors and all that out on site. So it was still exciting. You don't actually. So I mean, I guess that whole visual of a group also makes you much more accessible, and that's what is nice now. So we've been pitching Bandra Collective for all projects beyond our limit, and even maybe some projects within the limit. I mean, if we can pay everyone, they're all expensive.
I'd just like to add one. I know we want to just 30 seconds. I mean, the friendships are really important, sort of that mutual respect for each other. But I think it's the purpose. I, the purpose is what brings people together, right? Again, I'm going to be that. I mean, I'm going to be that architect at the table who's not going to talk about design, because it's been discussed quite a lot. Because I mean, if you look at a lot of these other collect groups. I mean, we like to use collectives. We don't want to say association, or because it's kind of like commerce association or chamber of commerce, etc. Like they all have a purpose. Their purpose is sort of making sure that if it's a chamber of commerce, let's say focused only on the rubber industry, they all work with each other, right? I mean, it's the purpose of making money which brings them together. So in a similar way, I think it's again that sort of being artists, being architects, where that individual recognition is something which we are fed, from the time we step into that sort of university setting, or even the idea and the notion of how we perceive artists and architects, right? In terms of how they're represented even in popular media. There is so much to be undone over there. And then there's something to learn from the way people in the capitalistic world, in the market sector operate. They all have lobbies. Like even the people who make your plumbing pipes, they have an association and they meet once a year, right? Even the even the guys who make your um, toilet fittings, toilet fixtures, they have an association. They all meet, and they're very, very strong. I mean, they really control how the whole market operates, because the common goal and common purpose is to make sure that they're constantly making money. So I think it's that purpose, and then that brings people together, and then how to really push that agenda and that notion of that individualistic identity. How do you then navigate that? It's not going to be easy, right? Because that's how we study, even in theory of architecture or art, we study about individuals. We don't study about groups and collectives. So it's going to be a long journey, but at least the conversation is happening in that direction. So yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I want to, after your comment, open to the.
Yeah, just a very tiny addition to this. Purpose is great, also friendship, but I think really, really important is to be of service. Like if you want to go and do something, like if you're interested in something, just go be useful there, start with that. That's the best way to enter something. And then just keep doing that. And it sustains, it comes back. I think that sort of makes the whole thing work, yeah.
I had a question for you, both of you, including Bandra Collective and you, that, having done the work, I think one of the things that I started feeling was that everybody's assuming that the status shall continue the way it is and that we would have to moonlight and do whatever we are doing. It's very clear to me that it's not going to be that. It will change. And I think there's a huge amount of learning that the other side is also taking, which we're not talking here at this table, which is, take for example, the politician, the municipal corporator. He's learned that something that was not possible has been made possible by your actions. And the need to intervene into these spaces is absolutely evident, and it is a need, and the state, by its own machinery, is not going to be able to do it. That's also knowledge for them. They know it. So I think it's only a matter of time before this thing opens up, right? So to my mind, this is, and actually, this is something which is very important for all of us to understand, because it has to become the new normal. This is the form of practice that we now need to intervene in, which is what I think was part of the subject of discussion this morning as well. So to my mind, this is something which is it's in the process, it's in the flow, and I think this opening up of knowledge at the other end and the experiences at the other end who are actually in control of things is also extremely important to understand, and that that cooperation is also going to be something which is very important, not just within, but also with the agencies that you are.
More comments, questions, comments? Yes. Okay, Ashwin.
Hi. I just wanted to ask to the Jaadughar collective that what is the idea of, when you're talking about community, how do you identify a community? Was the first one. And then when you're intervening or engaging with the community, is the idea to build a new community? And then therefore, what does the idea of agency become? Is the agency then to allow it to change in a direction? So two questions: what is the community and how to identify it, and what is the agency then?
These are great questions. I mean, I think community is, the term community is used so much that it's lost its meaning completely. I think that's the reason why I think we've been thinking of the wider group that we've been working off as a loose collective, like very particular about that it's a loose collective. It's people who come together, they have their own practices, they have their own scene, come together united by this purpose that we're interested in pursuing. And then as a result of that, there's a lot of things that are shared, and then we keep sharing things and sending things each other's way. So I think that is one thing. But in terms of how that comes together is that in a lot of ways, and I think this was discussed in the graduate symposium as well, in a lot of ways that the way that binary has sort of happened between this atelier model and a corporate thing, there is a complete kind of it feels like the only way to be able to stand on the same level as someone with a lot of power is to just come together and then pretend like you're an institution, and that's sort of the direction in which we're going with this. That okay, if 80 of us or like 70 practitioners from all over the country can come together and say one thing when it needs to be said, then we can pretend like we're an institution, and then we can have a publication, we can have a conference like this, we can have a sort of a programming or a pedagogical leaning with that purpose, and then we can stand on the same level as that. And that's the dream or the goal, I would say. Does that answer your question?
Hello. Just the part where how does one then identify a community in that sense, the identity of a community?
So far for us, that has been purpose driven completely. Yeah, it's been people who, in one way or the other, want a revolution. Honestly, like that's what we're talking about here for us. Like that's really like we don't want this kind of neoliberal system to persist in our lifetime. And how can we create something as an alternative instead of just talking about okay, this is wrong, but okay, then what? How do we create alternatives? How do we make them sustain? How do we make them prosper? Then we can really talk about something. So that's for us very clearly, that is the direction in which we come together. People who share that.
Just to add, yeah, like, I mean, the idea of, it's not so much about identifying communities, but like seeing them emerge, because like there's this, horizontality to it. मतलब, एक pedagogical approach होता है ना, where like, it's sort of like you're entering the community, which, I mean, no offense to any architect, but there's that, just sorry, like, I mean, yeah, oh, thanks. So, architect, arc, जो word है, arch, right, is the top-down kind of approach, and हम लोग anarchy हैं, तो वो दूसरे एंगल से आ रहे हैं, but
But also, I think one more important thing here is that we are not talking about coming together for a purpose in just that sense. Like the way we've been looking at our own studio and this space as well is from a lens of fertility. In that, let's create a space which is so fertile that उसमें चीजें हो जाएगी खुद ही. Like people will find it through he say whatever. That community for us is in that direction. So that's one of our sort of guiding principles.
Is it on? Yeah. So, we don't moonlight. This is our full-time job. We do not have other practices. We do not have a private practices. This is what we do. And so, and I completely agree with you because, personally I feel, and both of us, this is that we would not be able to survive. Like, I would rather just not pay my rent and be homeless than be like in those depressive glass offices. So, and we've been struggling to figure out a funding model because there is nothing for us to look at because this is how you've been, you like slog your ass off, you do, sorry for using those words, but since you said it's a safe space. and yeah, and then, you sort of at like 50 years, you start like making some money. And by the time like, the time for revolution, like you said, is gone. So I don't know when we'll be successful, but we're trying to figure out a funding model where we go to rich people, ask them to give us unrestricted funding. And and I'm just like, okay, you want to pay for your sins, give us $10 million and we'll fix this for you. I mean, I'm not joking. Like, this is what we're really trying to do. And to give you an example, and I don't know if it's, so we've been working with the MLA in Govandi, and we've been trying to we've been going to him for like 4 years, trying to explain his work and finally we went to him to say that, okay, we're doing this festival, just give us some money. And he agreed. He gave us the money. No, not. He gave us 5 lakh rupees. And then, he said that, can I give you from my party account? And, we said, no, we don't need it from the party account. This is not a political event. You need to do this on an individual basis and we will not put your logo anywhere. And he agreed. He gave us the money. So, these small victories. It took us like lots of time and waiting, and we're thinking we can do it. Like, we can go to Jeff Bezos and like Elon Musk and say this, just shut your shop, give us the money and let us fix this. Yeah.
I think it'll be only a matter of time before this becomes the normal practice. And this is what I think the entire younger generation is wanting to see and hear, that how do they kind of move into this space, right? And so I think it'll happen. It's just a matter of time. You are the crusader, shall we say? You're leading the gang, but I think the next few, yeah.
I think, I mean, I agreed with you when you said it's already started. It's a constant feedback loop, right? It's not going to, I believe, I mean, revolutions are very important, but I'm a believer in slow revolution. And I know like a lot of you will completely disagree with me on that, and that's okay. But I do really believe in the slow revolution idea, and it's a constant feedback loop, right? So it's so important that these conversations are happening at the university level. I don't know if you ever had these conversations. I mean, um, no, we didn't. We obsessed endlessly over, drawings and models, and as one should, because I love design and I love design for the sake of design as well. But we didn't have these conversations in our studios, and even in, even at the at the master's level. So it is happening, but it's also a feedback loop. That's not to say that because, some of us, or I mean, not us, but many of you might choose to go work in private practice, you're carrying a value system and you can bring that change from within. It's not that, hey, you know what, I'm going to only redevelop slums. No, go and work in firms that are making condominiums. But if there is like 20 of you saying that, hey, this is great, but do you really need to build all of it? Can you build only half and can you make a forest in the other half? Like a single family does not need 5,000 square meters of space, right? So if you're working with a developer, that's even better. So I'm not sort of a champion of like, to say that you have to choose only like doing social work and social design and not do the other thing, because that change will happen when everybody looks at sort of that role that we all play in how we shape our cities and our societies. So I do agree with you completely, and it is that feedback loop. And I'm going back to saying I'm very, very hopeful, because the current the people who are now graduating, entering the job market, are pushing and asking very important questions, like why 9 to 5? Like, yeah, I don't know why 9 to 5. We've been told that's how it's supposed to be, and we operate like that, right? So I think it's definitely happening. And that feedback is very important, and these conversations are important, and you take it back into all these sectors who just don't care about how the rest of the other half of the world lives.
A lot of the real estate guys and all that. It is possible to convince them. Not always, but I think it works. And the larger purpose, so to say, is understood by these people. That not that they don't understand it, and they do accept at times many ideas, because I think it also makes developmental sense. So
I think we'll just give some of the audience a little more space.
I didn't have kind of a question. I just wanted to comment on we 20 students from C had opportunity to work in Govandi with the community design agency, and what I felt personally was that there was a big paradigm shift in understanding what a community is, which Ashwin, the question that Ashwin asked, and how in everyday in everyday understanding what the people actually need their works. It was very we did very basic things where we try to record their oral histories and try to bring them out wherein everybody can understand them. But seeing the amount of work that uh, Bhawna and their community design agency has done there, because we saw it for the past 4 months in some way. So yeah, I think there's a certain kind of giving back every day, and it is a very not it requires a lot of effort to understand that the stories of everyone and what everybody needs, wherein in 25,000 people there are about 20 to 30 different cultures, and you have to kind of attend to everyone and everything, and uh, again break the hierarchical system that you all have been talking about, which just exists normally. So yeah, it was just a comment on how helpful the small allied design has been.
Yeah, so I really wanted to ask all of you. First, I'll start with a community design agency only. Uh, I mean, while we were going to Govandi, I mean, before going to Natwarpare compound, we had a lot of, I mean, different kind of imaginations about what the place could be and what it might be. But as slowly we entered into the field, and the field also opened out to us, there were lots of complexities that were kind of forming within, and और वहीं से इसका मतलब आप लोग का art discussion भी चालू हुआ, and similarly with the People's Freedom 75, how in that one hall of Bhupesh Gupta, 80 works had to be presented, and then you completely question this idea of sanitized white walls and doing it into a space which was, I mean, which was overlapping in many ways. So, I mean, when such complexities arrive, then how do you work out with them? Because I remember, I mean, while we were having our research dissertation, Kashi is not here. He was here this morning. So Kashi told me कि जितनी simple problems होती है उनके solutions ज़्यादा complex होते हैं, और जितनी complex problems होती है उनके solutions ज़्यादा simple होते हैं. So is it really this problem solution I mean thing, or how do you work with these negotiations? I really want you to open up about taking specific examples and kind of explain to us how it is done.
Since Bhavna took the course, I'm going to respond to that. I think, I mean, the comment before where you said we just did these simple things and, you know, we just narrated stories, or what you're talking about, the complexity and the simplicity around it. I think what was very fascinating for me with the course that C did with the studio, with Bhavna and Rohini, was that it was really about celebrating, right? Despite the complexities, despite the difficulties. That's why when the community came in to see the output from the studio, their faces just lit up, because no one had ever asked them what were the good things about living, you know, on a sidewalk, and what were the good memories that you had, and what were the challenges that you had, and what is it like here. So it's very, very powerful, because it's being heard and being seen is so important as an individual and as a community. And I think what the students from C were able to achieve in a very short duration was very, very commendable. And that idea that that you went in with certain preconceived notions. And I'll tell you what, it's not because you're students. All of us do that all the time. It's kind of like how our brain functions, right? Because we're like, we have a set of skills, we have a set of tools, and we want to apply it. Like everything looks, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, in a way. So I think everybody's, kind of suffers from that condition. But again, to be able to, again, to be aware enough to open up ourselves to those new ideas and new experiences is so important. So how do we solve for it? So at least at Community Design Agency, and then Bhavna can also comment, is when I, early on in my career, again, it's like that, the comment I made earlier, like every architect thinks the problem is not solved because he or she hasn't arrived at that location yet, right? So, so what happened was I went in and then I said, okay, I'm going to fix all this, right? I fix all the problems, right? But then very quickly I realized that the community was like, who are you to tell us what our problems are, right? For you, it's very important to have a clean street. Like for us, we need to fix the water in the water tank. Like, why do you care? And then, to quickly check myself and say that, hey, you know what, that's really, actually, it's not my problem. It's not my business. And then the moment, started spending time listening to their stories, listening to their experiences, and just being there for the sake of truly understanding was very helpful. And the other thing that we have found has been incredibly effective in a place like Natwar Parekh Colony is to find the good things and celebrate that. And once we started doing that, taking that approach, then the community was able to galvanize and come together and tackle much larger issues. I hope that a lot of you will come for the arts festival. Like Bhavna said, we're going to keep going back to it because that's what we're kind of living and breathing right now. There's the largest area, which according to the master plan that the MMRDA had done, that was the garden. You know how the residual space is the garden. There were how many vehicles there? 320 vehicles. We counted them, right? Both cars and two-wheelers. And the community had never seen the ground of that open space. And guess what? In 3 days' time, that whole area was cleared. 40,000 square, 40,000? 26,000 square feet, 2,600 square meters of space in a community that barely has any space. It was cleared because of the arts festival. And for the last 14, 15 years, different groups of people, the BMC, the MMRDA, the association, the society were like, ye garden hai, isko saaf karana hai, let's remove this, let's clean this up. It's a garden, we need to fix this problem. But what triggered it is this moment of joy and celebration. And that's very exciting because as, individuals, all of us love to create, whether you're an engineer or a programmer, we all love to create new things, right? And beautiful things collectively and together. So it gives you that outlet for that creativity, but also you are tackling much bigger problems at the same time. So that's what I wanted to say to your question.
Yeah. In
the community, the RTO, the police, they never really cared or bothered, but the community did more than anybody else. They all came together, and it's very contentious, right? Parking and taxis and broken down vehicles. It's not, you can't go and touch that. Like we kind of always steered clear of it. We ignored it, even though there's absolutely no space in the community. So everybody came together.
From the perspective of people's freedom, Rishabh, you were there. You remember how chaotic it was. Like we had to delay the opening because of how much we were struggling with how to organize it in the space, right? Because I think two driving things there were firstly that under no circumstance should we lose any of the complexity that is inherent in the subject matter that is being spoken about. Even if it's contradictory, doesn't matter. The complexity needs to be retained because what's being spoken about is really important and it's really complex, and that's what it's going to be. That was the first thing. And in that same vein, what we decided not to do was keep any text next to the work. Instead, we had people at the venue the whole time giving walkthroughs through the day, so that interaction with the work was interactive. You could ask questions, you could talk about it. People in multiple languages were able to discuss the work. So that was the first thing. The second thing, I think, was to step back, to just say that you will not have as much control. I think dealing with any complex things, it's really important. Like even with the Govandi project, it's really important at one point or from the beginning to say that this is not going to go exactly how I want to and how I want it to go, and that's a good thing. Let it not go exactly how you want it to go. Instead, leave room for interpretation, and in that vein, for example, with art, like we're talking about this kind of thing, it is interactive. Let there be multiple readings. Let people who've come there, like everyone didn't look at all the work positively, right? And that was really important, that people came with their critical things and were like, ye kya hai? Ye tumne aisa kyun bana hai? Right? Like those were really important conversations to have had at that point, right? And all we could do there was to say that, okay, I'm going to put this work with this work, and through the gap between these works, that other work is visible and it is open to interpretation. And that's the best that we can do. And I think that was really, really helpful. And Justin he made that happen for us, honestly. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
Glad everybody's still holding on to their energies here.
Yeah, sorry. This is more like a question towards the way the practices had formed up. Like, and also to put it in a slightly devil's advocate manner, like what is the amount of role privilege plays in setting up a revolution? Because when you guys say that, collectives happened, a lot of points that Anuj pointed out, funding, moonlight, and like managing projects after the collective, like those were the things that I relate to. I'm currently trying to be in that space or shift in that space. However, like meeting like-minded people, like when one member in the panel says that, I would rather be not pay rent and be homeless than work in a glass box office, were also your immediate families ready to do that? Or like, to take that stand, to make that jump, like what all I'm just asking, as in it almost felt like meeting each other was almost like a miraculous point for me. Like that happened, and after that, there was like a constant push. But how does that first spark comes out to be?
I won't talk about privilege. We're Bandra collectives.
Pass the mic to Borivali. No, I'm serious. No.
Spoke too soon. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And though, yes, today I'm at a far privileged position, but I grew up in a one-room house in an urban village on the outskirts of Delhi. So, it's not like suddenly like, oh, I grew up with a lot of money and I'm just like, oh, bahut ho gaya, sab chhod ke aage niklo. So, I understand, like, and I can go back to the life because, and that is where I feel I disagree with Sandhya about the revolution part, because I feel like somewhere what all of us are doing is like, releasing that pressure somewhere so that the revolution doesn't happen. Because we feel like, okay, I also want to pay my rent. I also want to, like, take care of my children. I don't have children right now, just like hypothetical. And, so we want to maintain a certain lifestyle. We want to maintain certain, and there is a cost to that. There is a cost to, and until and unless you are willing to give up on your personal, there is a personal cost to everything. And somewhere I feel like we have learned that act of negotiating really well, that we are this but we're also that. And I am one of them. Like, yes, I'm able to do this week because yes, we have good funding from, a funder who understands our work. Without that, it would be really difficult to do what we are doing. So we're part of, but I constantly ask myself that, are we stopping the revolution? Because somewhere I feel we are not letting, that's what I feel like the works of the non-profit is to not have the balance, just keep it over. Just let the anger be at the point where we are uh, relevant. And are we willing to give up our power? Are we willing to give up our relevance? I don't have answers, but I would like to see in my lifetime see, and that's why I said that, because I know there is a personal cost. I know, like, I don't want to have children, because then I don't want to think about that, oh, I have them to school, so no, let me do work for this client and that client or whatever. So yeah, I mean, there will be a personal cost. I think there's no like denying.
अभी बोलना पड़ेगा ना, actually बोल. Cards on the table. आ जाओ, जादूगर आ जाओ, we'll start the revolution. आ जाओ, it's already underway.
And I mean, to Sahej's point, I think privilege, of course, there's no denying it, clearly. But I think the way that we sort of address that is to say that, not to say that, okay, we'll take any of these other things, like we'll facilitate, or we just say, hum thoda side mein ho jayenge. That's our way of addressing that. And that's what we did with People's Freedom as well. Like there were people there who live in slums, artists who were there, were present, who got their artist fee. And that was what we decided that, okay, this is how we're going to address this thing. Because like you're also saying, right? Like we're holding up the revolution, but why are we doubting that? Because we don't have anything on the line, right? It's not our anger. It's our anger on someone else's behalf, right? जो गुस्सा है उसको आगे आने दो, उसको बोलने दो. That is our approach. Yeah. Okay, sure, but yeah. No, I'm saying that if we feel like we are standing in the way of the revolution, like you're saying, right? Like, I feel like that point is not a doubtful point at all. For someone who feels like, kahan hai revolution, right? Like that is not a point of doubt. That's completely certain that kahan hai, kaise aayega, right? So our approach to that is side mein ho jao. Yeah.
No, I mean, thanks all of you all for this, bringing this up, this whole idea of collective and collaborative, and which we all kind of cherish, and friendships. I'm just kind of thinking of, from the funding question, etc. Right now, it's a like the energy is the mission, and the resource is philanthropy. So that's what it is kind of, it's hinged around. And both of them are not shashwat, they're not long durable. They're not kind of, they're not, they are product of a certain political economy. Even when, I mean, most of Mumbai's infrastructure was built through philanthropy, but then that was built through a certain political economy context where, the philanthropists were part of the government, and they were kind of getting so many benefits from the government, and therefore they were investing. So in fact, when the Tatas funded the High Court, they wanted High Court to be named after Tatas. It's Tata High Court and stuff like that. So there was this discussion. Yeah. I'm not joking. So I mean, Lakshmi Subramaniam's book is amazing in that, actually. So there is so it's, I mean, it works at that orphan capital kind of a thing, and capital's orphanage is very, very risky. It kind of, it moves. So what I was thinking is for you all to you all can also think of embedding in the existing cultures of the, because most of you all are event based, there is an event based. So the existing, like for example, the Ganeshotsav festival, 1 lakh Sarvajanik, which is public festivals that happen in the city, completely crowdfunded, completely organized by a set of people. Of course, it has all its kind of, religious overtones, ritualistic things, the whole thing. It happens for 10 days, it kind of, comes together. but there is a promise, and it happens again the next year. And happens the next year. There is a promise of coming back again and again and again. It's embedded somewhere else. So this is one possibility of thinking, of embedding your practices within existing cultures. I'm not saying religious cultures only, but there will be other things which the force of the context, the forces of the society might be already, there might be a force which can kind of which can be tapped and leveraged. So that is one one suggestion, and I mean, you don't have to kind of respond to it at all. I'm also thinking of what would be the pedagogy for this, because this is also a lot of wait and watch, a lot of negotiation, a lot of learn while living, this kind of thing which goes on. So it's not a I mean, I cannot bring a management person to kind of tell now this community involvement sikha do. Not possible, or there's a lot of working of way out as you kind of move. So is there a institutional, like Bhawna, you did a course, so is there even a possibility of thinking institutionally about the pedagogy of this? Are there any coordinates that we can think about to kind of think through, or what are the various ways in which you can actually, I mean, think of this becoming for example, a course. How do you kind of think about these things? Is there any reflection on that?
Respond.
Your second question is very, very good, and that's something which we have been thinking about a lot, right? About how to change, create a methodology or an approach or a pedagogy around it. And it's very important also because of the whole economic side of things, because it is that sort of institutionalizing it, creating a toolkit, and then how that becomes a product, and then how that then helps generate revenue for any number of causes or reasons, right? So we've been thinking a lot, and personally, and I'll let Bhavna also respond. I personally believe that it's largely also to do with where you start from, right? From a life philosophy starting point to then how do you put it in practice, and then how do you then take those tools and interpret it? Because it's so easy, human-centered design or participatory design, and there's so many guidelines and books and online tools and apps. There are so many of them out there, right? But the question becomes, individually and as groups of people operating philosophically, what is your sort of way of thinking or way of life? How to answer that question, like I have no clue, like zero clue, and that's something which we are trying to really understand and see how we can sort of. So far, I think we're kind of doing and demonstrating, and then people pick it up. It's through the doing, it's through the act of actually like making it happen, and then that's how it's translating. But I'm going to let Bhavna weigh in on that.
So, I want to go back to what Rishabh was saying about complex problems having simple solutions. So, just going back to the course that we did, I think the first thing that we did on the course was do a privilege walk. Everybody knows what's a privilege walk. I mean, the students who did, they know, they're nodding their heads, but just look it up later. So, and then I realized that C is a private institution, so I don't know, do you have reservations? So, yeah, so, and then it led me back to my experiences of, I went to a government college and I lived in a dorm, and I had a Dalit roommate, a Muslim roommate, and before that, I was never in like such a diverse place. So I think I'm using that example that sometimes you enable these things by having like these real time experiences, exposing people to, move out of comfort zone, not for a moment forget that you want a like-minded community. Be in a position where you're wrong. Be in a position where you are the more privileged person, even though you think that. And I grew up in a in an urban village, a very patriarchal, and up till that point, till I went to college, I thought, oh, my life has been really difficult. Oh my God. But then, meeting other people and just like, yes, you've been privileged. So that intersectionality, I feel, has to be embedded in architectural pedagogy. And this is what we do. Like at CDA, we have a very diverse team. Like we want like from the hiring, from like how we sort of conduct community meetings, how we conduct, and it has also like made us question even our where are our personal circles. Are we like trying to sort of you can say that okay, intellectually we, but it's not that easy. you know we can say that, oh, we are friends because we intellectually or like emotionally, but somewhere all of these things play. So somewhere like, and like I said, like there has to be some amount of discomfort. There has to be some, there's room for discomfort, for questioning, critiquing, some bit of cynicism. And I think pedagogically, you guys know how to like embed it.
I would also like to add a little bit.
One is in the internship model, right? Like allow students to accompany you in your as companions in your practice, for some time, for some duration. I think that's the most useful form of pedagogy, which is not kind of structured institutionally, but it is basically you become a companion of your practice, and then you kind of start kind of
It's learning from life, instead of handbooks and all.
Yeah.
But only because we haven't figured out how to do it, and I'm sure that there has probably better that you not figured it out.
No, and the only thing validate the architectural internship by having somebody on your campus being the figurehead, but really they are working with an organization which has something to do with architecture, but not entirely. And I think that's quite okay. We can take such responsibilities, I think, as teachers.
Thank you for raising that point, because we have not been able to take on interns every year or we haven't been able to take interns every internship cycle, because we don't always have that sort of drawing work. We do architecture, but it's not consistent enough that we're able. That's a very valid point. Thank you for raising that, because yeah, we are not. Yeah.
Colleges, there are people who will willingly take up that responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah. In context of people's freedom, like you said about Ganpati, I think that was one of the things that we were looking at as a model. And sure enough, after we finished our show, all the works traveled to Bengal. Anupam Roy held another show there with more works from students from there. And it's sort of like a living exhibition, and we plan to do it every year. In terms of our space that we're talking about now, like expanding and creating a new space, we are thinking about it as a Sarvajanic model. We are thinking about it as People's Freedom Cooperative, not collective, cooperative, as a cooperative space. And current thoughts are that two requirements for every participant should be that firstly, you have to participate in a yearly show. Even if you're not an artist, doesn't matter. Everyone presents their work at one point every year. And secondly, every practitioner has to teach a course. Important, very important. Whatever you're working on, current research, past research, doesn't matter. Teach a course. It can be a week-long course, it can be a semester-long course, it can be a year-long course, but every participant must teach a course. I think pedagogically, engaging with work in that sense is really important, because you get real deep engagement with your work. And of course, like just the act of teaching opens up so much within those things that it's unmatched, frankly. And lastly, I feel like having done that, once you have a group of like-minded individuals, young people with that energy there, then the internship model really comes in. That, okay, you come to this shared space, you participate in these things. Now you have a pool of people willing to work for you. Take them to your studios. Let them intern there. That is sort of the thing that we are thinking about right now and expanding into.
Right. Just to probably even sum up because we are running out of time, but I think what you're saying. You haven't figured out the pedagogy. You guys figure it out, or you're saying everyone should teach a course. I think what would be really interesting is not to try to teach a course, but just take people as companions along with you. And I think this kind of learning from life and learning from all kinds of things which may not be just in the course curriculum, but sort of just expanding that model of friendship, like taking people along with you, I think will be really interesting as a model of pedagogy for us to explore. And to kind of also extend this sarvajanic model, there's a dinner that is organized by the fifth years, completely crowdsourced and part of this whole festival that we're continuing for this week at sea. So all of you are welcome. Anuj,
Yeah, I just want to kind of, close this by saying that this has been an amazing week. It was themed around the idea of noise fields, and we started on the first day by inviting young graduates, freshly kind of passed out graduates to share their doubts. And in that sense, it was in some sense an inner voice of, conflicting, noisy voices. Yesterday, day before yesterday, we had the noise field conference where we expanded that to the entire world, so to say, where we had many kinds of interesting conversations. Yesterday we had the Govandi rappers, and they kind of really put rhythm to our noises, and today we have soundings where we have actually kind of made this table into a sounding board. So I think it was such a lovely and well held week for us. So thank you so much for participating. And that also brings to the closure of noise fields. So in that sense, I really want to borrow from what Pratik said, of the idea of fertility, and this idea of the field and fertility, and creating these many kinds of voices and noises to nurture a sense of companionship and friendship, which will allow us to subvert the predominant forms of practice of architecture in space. So thank you so much, and please join us for dinner.